Welcome to this episode of the Integration Podcast. Today we have with us Martin Abbott, all the way from Perth, Australia, and he's going to be talking about FHIR, which is a healthcare standard. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. So I understand you are a renewed MVP again.
Yes, just. So I used to work for Microsoft. I worked for Microsoft for about 2.5 years. I left Microsoft, well, just over a year ago, in fact, and got my award back. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and it's in Azure, but specifically in Azure Integration PaaS. Right. So not that surprising, given my background in BizTalk and integration and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's great to be in a program, right? I understand it's already a little bit short-term to be able to go to Seattle for the summit again.
But it was, unfortunately, it was, because I think the MVP summit had actually closed applications to go anyway, so it was kind of like just the wrong time, but so tempting. Obviously, the integration community being pretty small, so tempting just to hop on a plane and go over there and say hi to everybody anyway. But I decided again because obviously I'm going to London in June for Integrate 2024.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that will be fun again anyway. To have you coming over, and we have a very good, really good representation actually from down under, right? With at least 3-4 MVPs and a couple of at least Wagner coming over from New Zealand, of course. So that's going to be a very good representation of down under anyway. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about FHIR, the healthcare standard. I would just say just go ahead and we have the conversation and everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've got some slides which I'll talk to just briefly, but I came up with this title. We didn't start the fire. It's kind of a play on fire being fire and fire, the song by Billy Joel, who I'm a big fan of. So it's kind of one of those things that I've given this presentation a couple of times, but I think the key thing for me is anybody who's done some stuff with BizTalk or healthcare generally in the past will probably know HL7. So that's Health Level 7, which is the standard that I'll just fix this slide here, which was established a very, very, very long time ago, but still very well recognized and most importantly, still very heavily used, right?
Yeah.
But things have to evolve. So in 2019, the first version, I suppose, release version of FHIR came out. And that was, as I've said up here, it's an open standard evolves. So what does FHIR stand for? Well, it stands for that. Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. So as the name suggests, it's all about healthcare and it's all about providing a mechanism in which you can interoperate with those healthcare resources. Fast, I guess, because it's an API. And then it allows you to do that. So, it's been around, like I say, for a number of years now, but Microsoft have an implementation of this inside Azure. And that's, of course, the reason why we're talking about it specifically, because of that implementation of it inside Azure itself. Now, the versioning of FHIR is currently up to release 5, although release 6 is kind of out there, at least in trial. The version that's supported by Microsoft is release 4. So it is one version behind, but there is a way of converting between the versions that FHIR publish that allow you to do some very simple conversions between those. And really that conversion is around the maturity of various objects inside the FHIR service, right? So that's kind of the way that kind of thing works.
So that's really... Because what I know of HL7, it was just about message definition, and of course, before it was even XML, it was always with the pipeline stuff and that kind of separators. So they have moved already also to XML. In the early uses of FHIR, it was still XML, right? But besides now just being a message format definition of how specific information must be exchanged between partners, just like you said, it's also about APIs, right? So the accessibility is much better than just before.
Yeah, and look, a key aspect of that is really think of FHIR as the name suggests, an interoperable resource. So it's not something that is meant to replace your electronic health record. It's not meant to be something that replaces your practice system. What it is it's an aggregator of information so that you can exchange between those systems in a meaningful and, more importantly, standard way. Right. So any modern application, I've done quite a bit of stuff with Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare, which is a kind of a version of Dynamics 365. That talks FHIR both in and out, and it does that so as it can exchange information in a standards-based way with things like typical electronic health record systems, or as I say, practice management systems, billing systems. All of those things, because all of those things are kind of supported inside the FHIR standard. So billing, for instance, is supported inside the FHIR standard. So you can imagine things like private health insurance companies, those sort of things would want to exchange information in a meaning and standardized way, governed way, and they can do that with the FHIR service.
Yeah, and I've explored a little bit into the standard, and of course, well, a lot of entities are already there anyway. Also, how about, couldn't find it immediately, but how about, what is it, outpatient clinic appointments and that kind of stuff? Or communication?
Yeah, so I mean, this is the homepage for FHIR, right? So, and you can see that there's a bunch of things in here that are standard objects, patient, pretty obvious. That's essentially the top level object. In a way, practitioner, your care team, an organization, location, healthcare service. Right, but there's also this financial stuff, so claims, accounts, invoices, and then there's other things around that. Medication, you can see here, diagnostics, so observations, right? So when you go and see a doctor, they'll fill some information into that practice management system that says Marty came in with this particular issue. That's an observation, and I observed this thing, and that's an observation. That entire thing would be in the vernacular of FHIR. That would be an encounter. And I'll get to what that might look like, but I thought it might be quite nice just to dig into some of these things, just so we can see how very, very deep this goes. If you tried to look for an entity relationship diagram, an ERD diagram for or an ERD for FHIR, one doesn't really exist, because the actual linkages between the various objects can go kind of circular in a way, right? So it's quite hard to represent in a standard way inside an ERD. But a key thing when you wander through FHIR is you'll see all these things here. So you can see content, this is patient. We'll see the maturity level N, normative. What that means is it's fully supported. And it was fully supported since version 4, which is the version that is supported inside Azure, right? So there are various different types. And as you wander through, and some of these links, I won't do it now, but as you wander through some of these links, you'll see maturity level 3, 4. Those haven't been fully adopted as a final version until they're normative, right? So it's important to think about that, because that does impact what versions you use and how you convert between those versions. Because some things will be normative in version 5, but they're not normative in release 5, but they're not normative in release 4. So so some of the attributes may have changed, or the way the data stored has changed. So just be conscious of that when you're playing with FHIR. Playing with FHIR. Play on words there. Fantastic.
Don't do your fingers.
No, there you go. So again, you can see here that essentially the patient has a bunch of attributes. Some of these are multi-level. So things like addresses, you can have more than one address. Contact details, you can have more than one contact detail. And you'll see a bunch of different types here that are identifiers like Boolean and date and things like that. We obviously understand, but address is a subtype. Codable concept, that's a subtype. And again, all these things mean something inside the context of FHIR. So, codable concepts could be, a blood pressure measurement, for instance. Or it could be, as it says here, because I'm on marital status, or it could be something that defines the marital status, which would be single, married, and so on, right? So it's just worth thinking about what that is and how those sort of things look. But with all these things and with all these objects inside the FHIR website, you can go into examples. Go back again. Double clicks there. Go into an example and you see the examples, right? And we can go into JSON here and we can see what a patient looks like. So here's a patient. They got a bunch of stuff. They've got name, Chalmers, Peter, James. And you can wander through and you can see various information here. So we saw that there was telecom, which can have multiple values. So you've got phone number, mobile phone, and so on. And we can wander through all this and you can see roughly the way that works, right? So this is JSON. Obviously, if we're using modern RESTful APIs, we expect the output to be JSON.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there's also still support for XML.
There is.
In FHIR. Yeah. And how do you see currently the adoption of FHIR within the industry? Are people or companies, organizations like healthcare institutions, are they still mainly on the somewhat lower versions of HL2? And is there some kind of way how migration should happen to FHIR? How does that look like? Or what do you see so far until now?
So that's an interesting question, actually, and it's a worthwhile question to spend a bit of time on, right? So in terms of adoption, every healthcare organization that I've worked for recently, in Australia at least, and that's one very, very major global health insurance company and one national healthcare provider, they're all fine. They don't use HL7. They're all fine, right? Yeah. So, and obviously, I mean, the reason that that they've, I guess, gone into that estate is because they're adopting modern applications, and modern applications like Microsoft Cloud Healthcare, as an example, and a lot of the electronic medical record software out there talk FHIR anyway, right? Now, in terms of moving from one format to another format, I didn't actually have this page open in my browser, but I will just quickly go and grab it. So if I come in over here and I just go Azure FHIR, convert data, because this is something that is very much in the auspices of Azure. So you can come down here and you can see that by using that endpoint or that operation on the FHIR service, you can actually convert from HL7 version 2 to FHIR.
Yeah.
So you pass in a payload into that particular convert data operation inside the FHIR service, and it will convert it automatically.
Yeah.
Right. And as it mentions, I think it mentions it down here somewhere. It actually uses liquid templates in order to do that.
Yeah.
So Microsoft's Azure FHIR service actually has that capability out of the box to convert from HL7 into FHIR.
Yeah. I kind of expected that some level of HL2 like v2 would be one-on-one compatible with the lowest version of FHIR, making that translation, that conversion, making it easier.
Yeah, look, it may vary. I mean, it's an open standard. Standards evolve. Version or release 5 is mostly backwards compatible, but if you have an Alpha 4 version of data, some of the attributes may be different. You may have to convert those attributes as part of that conversion, as part of that move, rather than R4, but or R5 rather. But that's the price you pay for moving from one to another, right? But you may have to do some conversion.
Yeah. Well, at least it's easier than do an upgrade from BizTalk 20x to some higher level, right? That's helpful. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So let me. But going back to the example that I was talking about, because I think it's worthwhile just understanding how these various objects fit together, right? So, and this is kind of like what I was talking to. So on the left-hand side there, you can imagine that as a patient, I'm going to go and see my doctor. Why am I going to see my doctor? Because in this particular example, I've had pain in my ear, my right ear, for 3 days. And I've noticed that I've had an elevated temperature, so I'm running a fever. So I call my doctor, or my doctor's surgery. I go and see my doctor. This particular doctor is Dr. Hippocrates, named, or obviously the oath was named after him. So I'll go there and he will perform an observation. So he may look into my ear and he'll see that I've got an inflamed eardrum. He'll take my temperature. I've got an elevated temperature, albeit not by much. He will go, you know what, as a doctor, I know that this means that you have a particular condition. otitis media. And as a result of that, he will prescribe a broad spectrum antibiotic, amoxicillin. All of those things are conditions, or are objects inside FHIR.
Yeah.
So you'd be able to build this encounter, the observations and the conditions and the prescription all within FHIR, and be able to encapsulate this entire thing in one particular record, or a bunch of records that are linked together. And things like the amoxicillin, things like the observed temperature, that's where those codable concepts come in. The idea is that you write something that is itself standards-based. So as an example, one of the big things, for instance, it's a global standard, and it's to do with how you present and what the outcome is something called SNOMED, right? So SNOMED is a bunch of standard-based codes, which means certain things, and that's a global standard. SNOMED CT. There is a version of it specific for Australia, of course there is. But one of the other things that there is a set of codes, and again, it's very well established framework called LOINC, and I'll just show that because again, that talks to that codable concept. So if I go back over here, go to LOINC. So that LOINC code, so you may see in an observation a LOINC code which says 8462-4, and that will then have a value. Maybe that value is 85. Right.
Yes.
Whatever. So and obviously there's two measures for your heart rate, your diastolic and systolic, but so all of those things themselves are backed up by standards as well.
Yeah.
So it's standards within standards to make sure that everybody, when they're exchanging the information, understands how to get that information.
Exactly. Yeah, that's remains amazing, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But if we were to go and have a look, just a brief wander around the Azure portal, just see what this looks like in reality. So if you start going through the Azure FHIR service documentation, it will say this has been retired since October last year, I think it was, because what's happened is it's been brought under the banner of the Azure Health Data Services. And what the Health Data Services is, like I say, it's an umbrella that contains not just FHIR, but DICOM, which is about medical imaging. So bringing medical imaging, and medtech, which is more around things like smartwatches and that sort of stuff, right? So that ability to stream data and smart pacemakers and so on and so forth, right? So there's a bunch of cool stuff around that. But obviously we're here to talk about FHIR. So if we were to wander in here, here's the one I created earlier. And not surprisingly, this looks like a very standard. That's a very standard page, right? Convert your data again here, so there's the opportunity to do that here. I've set this up to use OAuth. So there's a system managed identity. If I was to wander into identity here, we can see that I've got system managed identity. I can configure export. So if I've got data, I can query that data and export specific portions of that data to another place. So you can imagine that, if, for instance, you have a system that doesn't speak directly to APIs, you can configure that export, have it automatically export out, and then as a result of that, convert that data into a format that other system can use. Right. So again, that talks to the broader overall how this may fit into an integration architecture.
Yeah. There's an interesting change anyway, right? Before, and then indeed I'm talking about the 80s and 90s and probably also the early 0s. All that integration that was happening within healthcare, it was all happening on premise. There was a core system, it was indeed the patient information and all kind of other stuff, and all the other systems for all the different specialisms, they connected to their core system. And now, indeed, with those Azure capabilities, you're moving part of that data outside on-premise, and thereby also making it easier to connect to other online systems, of course.
Yeah, look, we're living in an API economy, right? So,
Exactly.
so that ability to, if you consider that and the industry has changed generally. I mean, the IT industry and generally industry has changed. We always used to say that the most important asset in an organization was the people.
Yeah.
Right. I think increasingly, whilst that's not to like, say that the people aren't important, but a lot of organizations go, the most important asset in our organization nowadays is the data that we hold. So obviously, the value is in the use of that data, not just storing it and never using it, right? So exposing that through an API and the API economy, event-driven architectures, microservices, all that good stuff around that integration space that we all know and love, is really where that secret sauce is in terms of making sure that the data that you're storing becomes relevant and useful.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, with this particular data, it's stored in a very specific format because it's formalized as that. But there's nothing to say, for instance, that you couldn't export that data, because you can export it. It comes out in a what's called an ND-JSON file, which I think is new line delimited JSON. So every line has a single record on.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you couldn't export that and being conscious that it may contain PII. So there could be some personal information there, right? And there probably likely is. So you just have to be very careful how you do this, but being able to export that and then perhaps reporting that. How many people have we seen in the last 6 months?
Yeah.
That kind of thing, right? So that being able to report on things is obviously where that secret source is of that data, because that tells you the metrics and that's what plays into your revenue. So
True. Yeah, well, that's pretty interesting stuff, Martin.
You want to see how it works?
Sorry?
Would you like to see how it works?
Yeah, of course, sure.
I've got some examples here as well, right? So let me just reauthorize myself on my system, right? Seed, use that token, right? Cool. So there's a few operations that you can do, right? So the first one is metadata here. I just wander through a few of these. I won't go through them all. And here you can see that there's a bunch of information, capability statement. Let's just move that up a little bit, shall we? Let's just move that up so as it becomes a bit bigger on the screen. Right. So you can see here, experimental true. Okay. So version 4, as it says. And as you come down here, you can see the sort of things that it supports. So formats, right? How you get tokens, right? But then per resource, so there's an account resource, what interactions are supported. So create, read history, and so on, right? So this essentially gives you what's called a capability statement, and that's part of the FHIR standard. A capability statement that says what functionality this particular instance of the FHIR service provides. Right. So, and it's all very terribly interesting. And there's a nice little health check. So if you did want to do sort of things like heart beating, you can come back and you can see here that it's successfully connected and it's healthy.
Yeah. So not just about what you as a user can have access to, but like you said, about the capabilities of this actual service.
Yeah, and look, if you're building a very, very large solution, it may well be that you'll want to expose at least some of that metadata so that people who are consuming your service know what you can consume.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. How you consume it. Right. But again, just conscious of the fact that there's a lot of potentially private information in here, so you just need to make sure that you're being very, very careful about what you're exposing. Right. So it's always worth pointing that out.
Yeah.
So, excuse me very quickly. Right. So if I just use, so this is my API, and if I just do patients as an example, it brings back all the patients that are in the system, right? So you can see here, version 1, everything is versioned. So if I patch this, if I update it, I'll get a new version. It'll tell me the last updated date, which is great if you need to do some kind of differential analysis between things. And you can see here various information, white in terms of my ethnicity, non-Hispanic. So various names here. This is just canned data that you can download and install. Medical record number. There's my medical record number. Coding. So that's my social security number. It's obviously American data, and so on. Right? And you can see that this is all very, very relatively readable. But obviously, you wouldn't read this. You'd extract this and put it into a system that you read from. And there's a bunch of things here that I won't go through just in the interest of time, but you can add in a couple of ways. So in this particular case, I've got a body of text. I'm going to just expand this down a bit. So just move that down a bit. Right, so you can see here I've got a body that's got a patient in it with a name, but I'm also adding you can see here that I'm at the same time as adding the patient, I'm adding an observation. In this particular case, the observation, so there's that LOINC code that I talked about, 789-8, which is my blood count. And we can see that I've got a volume of 4.12 times 10 to the trillion per litre, as an example. Right? So posting that and posting my patient record. So you can see there that what I'm doing is I'm adding not just a patient, but an observation at the same time. Right? Because I can do that. There's a bunch of ways of searching. I won't go through the slides. I've got the information in the slides, and obviously we can share the slides or link in some way if you so desire. Here I've got, I'm just searching for somebody. The name contains James. That would be the one that I won't add, but I could do. Observation search here is another example. If I look at this, I've got those two LOINC codes. So 8462-4. So that's the systolic, 8480-6. The diastolic, that's the one I showed before. And you can see here it's saying, show me where I've got an observation where the systolic is above 90 and diastolic is above 140. So essentially that's hypertension, right? So bring back any observations and the patients that are associated to those where there is people with hypertension, for example. So all that sort of stuff is really good stuff. There's a way of exporting, as I mentioned. So by default, all I've done there is I've said, okay, well, export all the patients to that particular container. And that's when you do that, that's what comes out in here. So you can see here, for instance, as an example. So this is that MD JSON, that new line delimited JSON file. And you can see each record is on a single line. So each one of these is a JSON file that is specific to one of those records that's in this FHIR service over here. This is my own FHIR service that I play with. There is capability being built into the solution around GraphQL if you want that more sort of that ability to query in a graph format, which is very, very vogue at the moment. If we click send on that, you will see that it says not found, because currently that's not implemented inside the Azure FHIR service. But there is actually an open source solution that you can put on front of your FHIR service, which will convert the outbound data into something and will convert the inbound data into the appropriate mechanism for querying your data source. So there is a third-party solution to that problem. Validate's quite an interesting one. So validate allows you to essentially, as the name suggests, validate the type of record. So if I go for this particular patient here, I'm not sure if that's one of the ones that I actually have. Oh, it is, right, cool. And you can see it's saying severity incomplete. And it's saying that operation outcome.location is deprecated. So what validate does, it allows you to use the idea of a profile. So there's standard profiles, of course, inside the FHIR service. But you can update those profiles. So you can say, okay, well, every time I create a patient record, there must be a date of birth, which by default you don't have to, but there must be a date of birth. And if you do that, when you try and write the record, you can get error signals back. Now, we've not talked about outbound. There is a subscription process which allows you to subscribe to outbound topics. So if you've got a client topic, like an endpoint, for instance, you can subscribe to that. I've never managed to get that working in the Azure FHIR service. It is still experimental in R4. So I'd imagine they probably just haven't implemented it. And I think it's still experimental in R5 as well. So it's not fully baked yet, I guess is probably the point there, really. It's one of those, your mileage may vary. But one thing I do want to talk to, just very quickly, just conscious that we're talking for quite some time, and I want to make sure that we cover some things. Like all things, if you go to the Azure Architecture Center, there's really great stuff here about standard reference architectures that are around and implemented for Azure Health Services in particular. And not surprising, I'll just choose one particular one, and we'll just use this one here because it's probably one that's got the most detail in it. Let me just zoom in on that.
Yeah, quite a lot of
And you can
information.
see here, right? You can see you got API management, you got the FHIR loader there, which is an Azure function. You've got key vaults. You've got all these other things that are got a standard, I suppose, standard integration-y type things.
Exactly.
So the key thing there really is to just remember that whilst FHIR is very specific to healthcare, of course it is, it's exposed as an API, and essentially what that does is opens up the data source and allows you to then interact with that through standard integration patterns, whichever way you want to do that.
Yeah.
Whether that's request response, whether that's asynchronous through messaging and service bus, whether that's through eventing, sending out, updating something and then sending something to event grid to say, come and grab that piece of data. It's just part of that standard overall ecosystem of Azure.
Yeah, that helps a lot, right? With developing solutions. Yeah, you can just use the tools that you already know, and of course, you need to be aware of all the healthcare stuff and how FHIR works, and so on. But all the integration stuff that's already there, so that helps a lot. Yeah, it's just
Yeah. Look, in any organisation that's adopting FHIR, like I said, there's two big organisations that I work with over here when I was working for a different company. They understand, what observation means. They understand. I mean, observation probably doesn't mean anything internally to them. Yeah, observation is something else in their systems, right, in their medical record system. And an encounter is not an encounter; it's an appointment, right? So, because appointment is the word that tends to be used over here in Australia, as it is after all in the UK, right? Yeah. So there's various things like that that the nomenclature might be slightly different, but it means the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So once you figure that sort of thing out, and for instance, Microsoft Cloud Healthcare, appointment is an object that maps to encounter inside FHIR, right? So because those two things are equivalent.
Yeah. It's just like a CDM, right? It's a common language, and that helps. In the conversation, it helps prevent confusions. So that's the real benefit of FHIR and before Azure 7 as well, of course. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Yeah, well, I think this has been a very good introduction in FHIR, and also indeed in what Azure provides in that healthcare area. So that's really great. Was there anything else you wanted to show, to tell, or to share?
No, I mean, I guess the key thing with all of these things is familiarity comes from use.
True.
Right. So whilst you look at that JSON file and it looks very, very complicated and so on and so forth, it's all backed by schemas, right? That's the whole point. It's all backed by schemas. And none of us know everything that's to do with all the interactions that we have, right? And it may well be that you don't care about the large volume of the data that's stored in FHIR, but you may care about some of it, right? And the key thing, like I say, about FHIR is it's that block in the middle, right? So you may have patient information coming in from your medical record or external sources. You may have information coming in from practice management software. You may have information coming in from imaging software, right? That goes into the DICOM service, which is another part of the health data services. And under that umbrella, you can query all of those things, right? So, and get that information back out. So whether you're using something like Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare, which I keep coming back to because it's the one that I've had most experience of, Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare, which is, like I say, a model-driven app inside, or several model-driven apps inside Dynamics 365. Whether you're using something like that, that's not a medical record. It's not meant to be a medical record. It's meant to be an interaction, with your customers. Whether you're using things like, so say you're a health provider, right? You may have specific codes, which means specific things in terms of your health insurance provision. So maybe you store that information inside the FHIR service, drag that out, use SNOMED codes to identify what that particular thing was, what that interaction was. So say that was an MRI, right? That may mean a translation from that SNOMED code into the code that means something into your billing engine. And again, there's actually an API that allows you to do those sorts of things inside Azure, right? There's an API that allows you to do those kind of conversions. So you can tie together through our standard integration patterns that we all know and love, the ability to move data in and out of these systems, move data from one system to another system, do file drops if you need to do reporting, for instance, or put stuff into a data warehouse, do things that, maybe you've got older systems on premises. You mentioned that, for instance, still a lot of that sort of stuff around. Dropping a file into a file share that's maybe exposed through express route to drag that data into an on-premises system. So many opportunities to use FHIR as that black box in the middle.
Correct. Yeah, and that's really, just so great indeed. Just like you said, it just provides so many different opportunities you can think of. By having this kind of technologies available. And
look at FHIR as something that sits in the middle, and there's all the integration around it. That's the way to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, fantastic. Nisha, thanks for the introduction. I think probably next time we will meet. We will indeed be during an Integrate that happens mid-June, 10 and 11 in London. If I'm not mistaken, there will be a session about healthcare, right? Wasn't that yours or?
Not mine. No, I think it might be Mick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. Indeed, yeah, that's correct. Yeah. No, so that's.
Actually, my session is around building integration solutions with GitHub Copilot.
Yeah. No, indeed, yeah. So that will be very interesting as well, indeed. Yeah. It will be his first time anyway, right? For him to come over to integrate. So that that will be fun for everybody, especially for our community. Yeah.
Well, look, I think it's fair to say that the integration community is such a great community, right? And there's a lot of support. A lot of people know each other, and we're all of us are all very, very happy to help and pitch in when we have questions, right? So.
Yeah, indeed. And many people, they are there for such a long time, right? People like yourself and all the others also coming from Australia, indeed, but also many of those European people, like Sandro, like Steve, Jen, and so many others. For them, Integrate is just the event to go to and connect again, discuss what's all happening in the space, in the integration space. Clearly, we'll have the Microsoft product group members coming over from Seattle. Also, share their messages, share their roadmaps. Talk to customers, talk to users. That will just be another nice event. What will be happening in only a couple of months. So that.
And I think that's a key point, right? So for anybody who's think whether or not they go to integrate in London. I think it's fair to say that the pro integration team, the messaging team, the teams, essentially the product teams at Microsoft, they could choose to do lots of sessions at Ignite. They could choose to do lots of sessions at Build, but they choose to do lots of sessions at Integrate because it's the one that they want to come to tell their stories and tell what's coming. Because they see such great value in that particular conference. I can't wait.
Yeah, simply because of the focus on integration. Right? It's in the name of the conference, right? Integrate.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, so that will be a good one. I think let's wrap up the recording. So thanks again, Martin. Great to have you in this episode. And for the audience, hopefully this is an interesting session for you. If anybody is interested in doing a presentation in this episode or in this podcast, I must say, feel free to reach out to us and we can see if we can make this work. And we hope to see you in this one. Thanks.
And just to add something to that as well, Alex. If anybody reaches out and wants to know more about FHIR, send them my way. I'm more than happy to have a conversation.